If there's a spark, I will guard it. Maerwynn's declaration echoed through the cold stone chamber as the monks turned away from the bloodied body on the table. The young healer, barely 17 winters old, clutched her worn herb pouch to her chest, defiant in the face of their dismissal. Outside, November rain lashed against the abbey's walls, and thunder punctuated the disapproving silence that followed her outburst. "Child," Prior Godwin's voice was heavy with pity. "Even the royal physicians couldn't save such a man. Look at him, more corpse than night already." The wounded stranger lay motionless, his armor cracked and flesh torn where enemy blades had found purchase. 2 soldiers had deposited him at Ederholt Abbey's door before vanishing into the storm. No name, no house colors, only a strange silver wolf seal hanging from a chain around his neck. "The grave awaits him by morning," the prior continued. "We've more deserving souls to tend." But Maerwynn stood her ground. Daughter of a blind herbalist, apprentice to old monk Anselm, she had spent her life learning to see what others missed, and in the shallow rise and fall of the knight's chest, she recognized the fragile rhythm of life unwilling to surrender. "Then I shall tend him alone," she whispered, already reaching for her scissors to cut away the blood-soaked fabric. The monks departed with muttered prayers, leaving Maerwynn to her foolish vigil. In the dim light of a single candle, she worked through the night, cleaning wounds with boiled Bardane infusions, stitching torn flesh with horsehair thread, and whispering ancient songs to keep death at bay. For 13 days, she barely slept. Each morning before dawn, she changed his bandages, massaged his limbs to prevent the stiffness of death, and spooned herbal broths between his cracked lips. The soldiers who had brought him never returned. The monks avoided the chamber, convinced the stench of death would soon follow. Not even dogs return after losing so much blood. Prior Godwin had sneered when passing her in the corridor on the 7th day. On the 14th morning, as she prepared a fresh poultice of nettles and artemisia root, Maerwynn noticed the wound on his side had begun to heal, the angry red lines retreating. A miracle so small only she would recognize it. Exhausted, she leaned over his bed and whispered, "If you can hear me, don't leave me alone among the dead." A heartbeat of silence passed. Then the knight's eyelids fluttered. Maerwynn froze, afraid to breathe, lest she break whatever magic held this moment together. Slowly, deliberately, the man's eyes opened, deep blue, clear as summer sky, and startlingly alert. His first whisper, rough as burnt parchment, shocked her. "Who dressed me like a peasant?" The accent was refined, noble, nothing like the gruff speech of common soldiers. Maerwynn stumbled backward, knocking over her bowl of herbs, scattering precious artemisia across the stone floor. "You're at Ederholt Abbey, sir," she managed. "You've been hovering between worlds for nearly a fortnight." The man tried to rise, wincing as the movement pulled at his stitches. "Fortnight?" His eyes widened in alarm. "What of the battle at Garenfold Pass? The King's banner?" "I know nothing of battles, sir. 2 soldiers brought you here, half dead and alone." His hand moved weakly to his neck, finding the silver wolf seal still there. Relief washed over his features before confusion returned. "And you are?" "Maerwynn, sir, the healer's apprentice." She straightened her simple linen dress, suddenly conscious of its coarseness beside this man who spoke like nobility despite his current state. "You've been tending me? Alone?" Disbelief colored his voice. Before she could answer, the chamber door burst open. Prior Godwin stood there, mouth agape at the sight of the conscious knight. "Impossible," he breathed, crossing himself. "I shall send word to the local lords immediately. Perhaps someone is searching for this man." Within hours, the quiet abbey transformed. Monks scurried through corridors, cleaning and preparing for important visitors. Maerwynn was pushed aside as the abbey's most experienced healers suddenly took interest in her patient, claiming credit for his miraculous recovery. By evening, a procession of riders thundered into the abbey's courtyard, their cloaks bearing the royal insignia of Winthorn. Maerwynn watched from the shadows as they were led to the healing chamber, her heart pounding with uncertainty. When an imposing knight with a gray-streaked beard entered the room and saw her patient, he immediately fell to one knee. "By the blood of kings," he gasped. "It's him. It's Prince Theodric." The revelation struck Maerwynn like lightning. Not a common knight, but Theodric, the crown prince missing since the ambush at Garenfold. The heir to the throne of Winthorn had been saved by a simple village healer. In the chaos that followed, she slipped away, back to her small corner of the herb garden where humble plants grew. Her task was complete. The prince would return to his world of castles and crowns. She to her herbs, and the anonymous sick. But as the royal guard prepared a gilded litter for their prince, Theodric's weak voice cut through the commotion. "Where is she? The girl who tended me? Bring her to me now!" And Maerwynn's simple life was about to change forever. The castle of Winthorn rose like a stone giant against the winter sky, its towers piercing the low clouds as if holding up the heavens themselves. Maerwynn, dressed in the only clean dress she owned, a simple gray wool garment with faded embroidery at the sleeves, clutched her herb satchel as the royal procession approached the massive oak gates. "Why am I here?" she whispered to herself, feeling smaller with each hoofbeat that brought them closer to the fortress. Sir Alric, commander of the royal guard, rode alongside the prince's litter. "The prince commanded your presence," he answered without looking at her. "Though what use a crown prince has for a village healer, I cannot fathom." 3 days had passed since Prince Theodric's identity had been revealed at the abbey. 3 days of preparations, of hushed conversations between knights, of Maerwynn being measured for travel clothes she refused to accept. When the time came to depart, she had taken only her herbs, a wooden comb, and her mother's small bronze mirror. "I serve no purpose in a castle," she had protested when told to pack. The prince, still weak but clear-eyed, had replied from his litter, "You serve the purpose I assign you, and I assign you to keep me alive." Now, as trumpets announced their arrival, Maerwynn felt her heart hammer against her ribs. The massive gates swung open to reveal a courtyard teeming with nobles, servants, and guards all eager to witness the return of their lost prince. Ladies in fine silks and velvets lined the steps, their jeweled fingers covering painted lips as they gasped at the sight of their haggard prince. Knights in polished armor stood at attention, their hands on sword hilts. Maerwynn noticed how their eyes slid over her as if she were invisible, another servant among many. As attendants rushed forward to carry the prince's litter, Theodric's hand shot out and grasped Maerwynn's wrist. "Stay close," he commanded, his voice low but firm. The great hall of Winthorn Castle stretched longer than the entire abbey where Maerwynn had spent her life. Banners bearing the royal wolf crest hung from rafters high above, and enormous hearths at either end filled the space with warmth and flickering light. At the far end, upon a dais of polished stone, sat the royal throne, empty, awaiting its rightful occupant. Beside it stood a woman whose bearing left no doubt of her station, Queen Mother Rowena, regal in deep purple silk, her silver-streaked hair arranged beneath a delicate gold circlet. Her face, though lined with age and worry, still held the beauty that had made her famous in her youth. "My son," she breathed, descending the steps with measured grace as the litter was placed before the dais. Theodric struggled to sit upright, wincing at the pain from his healing wounds. "Mother," he managed, his voice stronger than it had been at the abbey, but still far from the commanding tone of a future king. The reunion that followed brought tears to even the most hardened knight's eyes. The Queen Mother knelt beside her son's litter, touching his face as if to assure herself he was real. Court physicians rushed forward, eager to examine the prince, pushing Maerwynn aside without a second glance. "Who treated these wounds?" demanded the chief physician, an elderly man with jeweled rings on each finger. "The stitching is crude, though effective." Before anyone could answer, a young knight with a narrow face and cold eyes stepped forward. "Perhaps we should question how our crown prince came to be in such a state, abandoned at a common abbey while traitors still walk among us." "Sir Cedric," Queen Rowena's voice cut through the hall like a blade. "My son has returned to us. That is what matters now." But Sir Cedric's gaze had found Maerwynn, standing awkwardly at the edge of the gathering. "And who is this girl? Another abbey servant?" All eyes turned to Maerwynn. She felt the weight of their stares, curious, dismissive, suspicious. Her rough-spun dress and simple leather boots stood in stark contrast to the finery surrounding her. "She is my healer," Theodric stated firmly, "and the reason I breathe." A ripple of whispers spread through the court. Ladies exchanged glances behind silk fans. Knights raised eyebrows. The court physician's face flushed red with indignation. "My prince," he sputtered. "Surely you jest. This child has no training, no lineage in the healing arts. Yet she succeeded where others would have pronounced me dead," Theodric countered. "She will continue to oversee my recovery." Sir Cedric laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "A peasant girl treating the crown prince? What next? Shall we have stable boys advising the royal council?" The laughter that followed burned Maerwynn's cheeks. She lowered her eyes to the intricate patterns of the stone floor, wishing it would open and swallow her. "Come," a gentle voice said beside her. An older lady-in-waiting with kind eyes took Maerwynn's arm. "Let us find you quarters while the court adjusts." As she was led away, Maerwynn heard the continued debate about her presence. The prince's voice grew fainter as she was escorted down a corridor, up a winding stair, and finally to a small chamber in one of the lesser towers. "This is normally for visiting ladies' handmaidens," the woman explained, lighting a candle. "It's not much, but safer than lodging with the servants given your unusual position." The room was indeed small, but contained a real bed with clean linens, a wooden chest, a copper basin, and a narrow window overlooking the inner bailey. To Maerwynn, accustomed to sharing a drafty dormitory with other abbey apprentices, it seemed luxurious. "Thank you," she managed, still clutching her herb satchel like a shield. "I'm Lady Elswith," the woman said. "I serve the Queen Mother." "You've caused quite a stir, young healer." "I never meant to," Maerwynn replied. "I only did what anyone with knowledge of herbs would do." Lady Elswith's smile was sad. "In this court, child, what you know matters less than who you are, and who you are is no one they recognize." After Lady Elswith departed, Maerwynn sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. Through her window, she could see torches being lit across the castle grounds as evening fell. Servants scurried about like ants, preparing what was surely a feast to celebrate the prince's return, a feast where she would be as welcome as a crow among peacocks. She unpacked her meager belongings, arranging her precious herbs on the windowsill where they might catch the morning sun. Then she took out her mother's small bronze mirror and stared at her reflection, a thin face with large green eyes, brown hair simply braided, skin weathered from gathering herbs in all seasons. "What am I doing here?" she whispered to her reflection. A sharp knock at the door startled her. When she opened it, a royal guard stood outside, his expression impassive. "The prince requests your presence," he stated. Immediately, the royal banquet hall blazed with 100 candles, their light dancing off golden plates and jeweled goblets. Lords and ladies of Winthorn's court sat at long tables arranged in a horseshoe, with the high table at its head, where Queen Rowena presided. Beside her, propped up with cushions and still pale from his ordeal, sat Prince Theodric. Maerwynn stood awkwardly near a stone pillar, unsure of her place. Lady Elswith had provided her with a simple blue dress, finer than anything she'd ever worn, yet plainest among the splendor surrounding her. For 2 weeks since their arrival, she had tended the prince's wounds each morning and evening, applying fresh poultices and brewing strengthening tonics. The rest of her time she spent hiding in her tower room or exploring the castle herb gardens, avoiding the curious and often hostile stares of courtiers. Tonight, however, the prince had insisted on her presence at the feast, celebrating his recovery. "Come forward, healer," the Queen Mother called suddenly, her voice carrying across the hall. Conversation dimmed as Maerwynn made her way toward the high table, acutely aware of every eye upon her. She curtsied clumsily, having practiced the movement only hours before with Lady Elswith. "My son tells me we owe you a debt of gratitude," Queen Rowena said, her expression unreadable. "Though I confess, I find it unusual that a girl of your station could accomplish what royal physicians could not." Before Maerwynn could respond, Sir Cedric's voice cut through the hall from his place among the younger knights. "Perhaps our prince was never as near death as we feared," he suggested, raising his goblet. "Perhaps any village woman with herbs could have done the same." Several knights chuckled. Maerwynn felt her cheeks burn. "Or perhaps," Theodric countered, his voice stronger than it had been since his return, "this village woman possesses wisdom our court physicians have forgotten in their pursuit of titles and royal favor." The prince's defense, while welcome, only intensified the court's scrutiny. Maerwynn stood frozen, caught between gratitude and mortification. "Tell us, girl," called another knight, his face flushed with wine. "What magic did you work on our prince? Some peasant charm passed down from hedge witches?" More laughter rippled through the hall. "No magic, my lord," Maerwynn answered softly. "Only knowledge of herbs and patience." "Speak up, child," commanded an elderly lord. "We cannot hear your mutterings from here." Maerwynn took a deep breath. "I said there was no magic, my lord. Only herbs, clean bandages, and refusal to abandon a wounded man." The simplicity of her answer seemed to disappoint the court, hungry as they were for scandal or mystery. Well, whatever your methods, Queen Rowena interjected, we shall reward you appropriately before sending you back to your abbey. Maerwynn's heart sank. Return to the abbey? She had not considered what would happen after the prince's recovery. Of course, she had no place here among nobility. Mother, Theodric began, but was interrupted by the arrival of servants bearing platters of roasted meats. As the feast continued, Maerwynn was directed to a small table at the far end of the hall, alongside lesser courtiers and visiting merchants. She picked at unfamiliar foods, spiced meats, exotic fruits, and rich pastries that overwhelmed her simple palate. At the abbey, she had subsisted on plain bread, porridge, and whatever vegetables grew in the gardens. Midway through the meal, she noticed a serving girl struggling with a heavy pitcher of wine. Without thinking, Maerwynn stood to help, taking one handle of the pitcher as she had often done at the abbey's infirmary. "What are you doing?" hissed the girl, alarmed. "Helping," Maerwynn replied, confused by the reaction. From nearby, Lady Elswith appeared, gently separating Maerwynn from the pitcher. "Healers do not serve at table here," she whispered urgently. "You draw attention to yourself." Indeed, several courtiers had noticed the exchange, their expressions ranging from amusement to disgust at her breach of protocol. As the evening progressed, musicians played while acrobats and jugglers entertained the court. The wine flowed freely, and with it, tongues loosened. When Maerwynn rose to deliver a tonic she had prepared for the prince's evening dose, her path to the high table was blocked by Sir Cedric. "Our little herb witch approaches the royal table," he announced loudly, swaying slightly from drink. "What concoction do you bring our prince tonight?" Maerwynn held up the small wooden cup. "A tonic of willow bark and honey, Sir Knight, for the prince's pain." "Pain?" Sir Cedric laughed. "Our prince needs strength, not coddling." He took the cup from her hands, sniffing it suspiciously. "Smells like mud and sheep's milk." Several nearby courtiers laughed. Emboldened, Sir Cedric continued, "Perhaps we should test the witch's brew." He made a show of offering the cup to a nearby hound, drawing more laughter. "Return that to her," came Prince Theodric's voice, suddenly beside them. He had left the high table unnoticed during the entertainment. Sir Cedric bowed mockingly. "My prince, I merely ensure your safety. Who knows what peasant remedies might contain?" "I know," Theodric replied coldly. "The same remedies that saved my life while you and your father's men retreated from Garenfold." The hall fell silent. Sir Cedric's face drained of color. "You insult my honor, my prince," he said quietly. "Your honor was not in question," Theodric replied. "Your judgment, however." He left the sentence unfinished, taking the tonic from Sir Cedric's hand and drinking it in one swallow. The tension in the hall was palpable. Queen Rowena watched the exchange with narrowed eyes, while other nobles pretended fascination with their food or the entertainers. "I believe I shall retire," Theodric announced. "Maerwynn, attend me." As they left the hall, whispers erupted behind them. Maerwynn kept her eyes fixed on the prince's back, afraid to meet the gazes that followed them. In the corridor outside, Theodric stumbled slightly, leaning against a stone wall. "You shouldn't have confronted him," Maerwynn said, moving to support the prince. "You're not strong enough yet, and you shouldn't have to endure such treatment," he replied grimly. "Not when you've done nothing but good." "I'm used to it," she said simply. "At the abbey, the monks treated apprentices little better." Theodric studied her face in the torchlight. "How does one so young become so resigned to cruelty?" "It isn't cruelty that concerns me," she answered. "Only whether I can continue my work. The herbs in the royal garden are the finest I've ever seen, and there are books in the physician's tower with knowledge I've only dreamed of accessing." Her practical response seemed to surprise him. Then he smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen from him. "You care nothing for court politics or noble titles, do you? They won't heal wounds or break fevers," she replied. His smile broadened. "Maerwynn of Ederholt, you are a strange one indeed." As they reached the prince's chambers, a messenger approached breathlessly. "My prince," he gasped, bowing hastily. "The Queen Mother. She's fallen ill suddenly. The royal physician requests your presence immediately." Theodric's face darkened with concern. "What ailment?" "A sudden fever, my lord. She collapsed after you left the banquet." Maerwynn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the drafty corridor. "Did she eat or drink anything unusual?" The messenger shook his head. "I know not, healer. Only that she burns with fever and speaks nonsense." "Take me to her," Maerwynn said, already reaching for her herb satchel, which she had taken to carrying everywhere. The messenger looked uncertainly at Theodric, who nodded. Both of us. Now. They hurried through torchlit corridors to the Queen Mother's chambers, where they found chaos. Ladies-in-waiting hovered anxiously, while the royal physician, Lord Wulfgar, bent over the Queen's bed. Queen Rowena thrashed against silk sheets, her face flushed crimson, her eyes unfocused. "What happened?" Theodric demanded, rushing to his mother's side. "A sudden fever, my prince," Lord Wulfgar replied, barely glancing up. "I've ordered bloodletting to release the evil humors." Maerwynn stepped forward, her practiced eye taking in the Queen's symptoms. The flushed skin, dilated pupils, dry lips, and the distinctive sweet-sour smell of her breath. "This is no ordinary fever," she said quietly. Lord Wulfgar looked up sharply. "Who let this girl in? This is a royal sick room, not an herb garden." "She's here at my command," Theodric said. "What do you see, Maerwynn?" She moved closer, examining the Queen's hands, which plucked restlessly at the bed covers. Her skin is hot but dry. Her pupils are wide as full moons. And her breath, she leaned closer, sniffing carefully. There's a sweetness, like honey overwrought. Lord Wulfgar scoffed. "Poetic descriptions help no one, girl. It's belladonna," Maerwynn said firmly, ignoring him. "Deadly nightshade poisoning." The chamber fell silent save for the Queen's labored breathing. "Impossible," Lord Wulfgar finally sputtered. "How dare you suggest—" "Is she right?" Theodric interrupted, his voice deadly calm. The physician hesitated. The symptoms could be interpreted, but surely no one would— "Can you treat belladonna poisoning?" the prince asked Maerwynn directly. She met his gaze steadily. "Yes, but we must act quickly." "Clear the chamber," Maerwynn commanded. Her voice transformed from its usual soft timbre to something firm and authoritative. The court ladies and attendants stared in shock at the peasant girl giving orders in the royal bedchamber. "You heard her," Prince Theodric barked when no one moved. "Everyone out except Lord Wulfgar and Lady Elswyth." As the chamber emptied, Maerwynn untied her herb satchel with practiced movements. "I need clean water, charcoal from the hearth and goat's milk. Fresh, not soured." Lady Elswyth hurried to fulfill the request while Lord Wulfgar hovered nearby, his expression oscillating between skepticism and alarm. "This is most irregular, my prince," he protested. "To allow an untested girl to— She is not untested," Theodric cut him off. "She saved my life when others had abandoned me for dead. Now she will save my mother." Maerwynn knelt beside the Queen's bed, her focus absolute. Queen Rowena's breathing had grown more labored, her skin hotter to the touch. With gentle hands, Maerwynn lifted the Queen's eyelids, confirming her suspicion. Pupils dilated so wide that only a thin ring of color remained visible. "How can you be certain it's belladonna?" Lord Wulfgar demanded, professional pride warring with concern for his patient. Without looking up, Maerwynn replied, "The dilated pupils, dry burning skin, racing heartbeat, and sweet bitter breath. I've seen it 3 times before at the abbey when children ate the berries mistaking them for blackberries." She opened a small leather pouch and removed dried black seeds. "Thistle black. It binds to poisons in the gut." When Lady Elswyth returned with the requested items, Maerwynn worked swiftly. She crushed the thistle black seeds into powder, mixed them with finely ground charcoal, and added goat's milk to form a thick liquid. "We must get her to drink this," Maerwynn explained, gesturing for Theodric to help raise his mother's head. "It will bind to the poison still in her stomach." The Queen resisted at first, turning her head away from the black mixture. But with gentle persistence, they managed to get most of it down her throat. "Now we wait," Maerwynn said, wiping Queen Rowena's brow with a cool cloth, "and prepare the second remedy." From her satchel, she produced a small clay jar sealed with beeswax. Inside was a paste of vivid green. "Monk's hood," she explained, noting Lord Wulfgar's alarmed expression. "Yes, it's a poison itself in large doses, but in this form, it will slow her heart to counter the belladonna's effects." "That's madness," the physician protested. "Treating poison with poison? The dose determines the medicine," Maerwynn replied calmly, measuring a tiny amount onto a spoon. "My mother taught me that. She was blinded by belladonna as a child, but lived because a wise woman knew this remedy." As she administered the second treatment, the chamber door burst open. Sir Cedric strode in, followed by several royal guards and his father, Lord Osric, a heavy-set man with cold eyes and an ornate sword at his hip. "What is happening here?" Lord Osric demanded. The entire court speaks of the queen's illness, yet we find her chamber nearly empty save for this herb girl administering who knows what. Theodric rose to his full height, though he still looked pale from his own recent wounds. I gave the order, Lord Osric. The queen has been poisoned. A shocked silence followed his words. Poisoned? Lord Osric repeated. A grave accusation, my prince. What evidence supports this claim? The healer recognized the symptoms of belladonna poisoning, Theodric replied, and Lord Wulfgar has confirmed her diagnosis. All eyes turned to the royal physician, who hesitated before giving a reluctant nod. The symptoms are consistent with such poisoning, he admitted. And you allow this girl to treat our queen? Sir Cedric demanded, pointing accusingly at Maerwynn. How convenient that she alone recognized this supposed poisoning. How convenient that she alone has the remedy. Maerwynn continued her work, mixing a third medicine, a tincture of ginger root and valerian, to calm the queen's tremors. She had expected this accusation and found she cared little for it. The queen's life mattered. Court politics did not. You suggest the healer herself is responsible? Theodric asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Sir Cedric stepped closer. I suggest nothing, my prince. I merely observe that strange events have followed this girl's arrival. First, you are found near death, yet miraculously recover under her care. Now the queen falls ill, and again, only this girl knows the cure. Theodric's hand moved to where his sword would normally hang, but in his invalid state he wore no weapon. Lord Osric noted the gesture and smiled thinly. My son speaks out of concern for the royal family, he said smoothly. These are uncertain times. The ambush at Garenfold that nearly claimed your life was no accident. Enemies of the crown are everywhere, sometimes in the most unexpected guises. The implication hung in the air like poison itself. Maerwynn felt the weight of their suspicion but refused to be distracted from her patient. The queen's breathing had begun to steady, though her fever still raged. If you truly care for the queen's well-being, Maerwynn said without looking up, you will cease this talk and fetch me fresh water and clean linens. Sir Cedric laughed incredulously. She dares give orders? To a knight of the realm and son of the king's closest advisor? She dares to save the queen while you stand about making accusations. Lady Elswith snapped, surprising everyone with her vehemence. The usually mild-mannered lady-in-waiting glared at the knight. Either assist or remove yourself, Sir Cedric. For a moment, tension crackled in the chamber like lightning before a storm. Then, Queen Rowena moaned, drawing everyone's attention back to the royal bed. Her eyelids fluttered and her breathing changed rhythm. She's responding to the treatment, Maerwynn said, relief evident in her voice. Lord Wulfgar moved closer, checking the queen's pulse with newfound respect in his eyes. Indeed, her heart rate is stabilizing. This proves nothing, Sir Cedric insisted, though with less conviction. She could be— Silence, Theodric commanded. My mother stirs. Queen Rowena's eyes opened slowly, confusion clouding her gaze before recognition dawned. Theodric? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I'm here, mother, the prince replied, taking her hand. Water, the queen requested weakly. Maerwynn gently raised a cup to the queen's lips, allowing her to sip slowly. When she had drunk enough, the queen's gaze shifted to the unfamiliar face before her. You are the healer girl? Yes, your majesty, Maerwynn answered, bowing her head. What happened to me? The queen asked. Before anyone could answer, Lord Osric stepped forward. A fever, your majesty. Nothing more. No, Maerwynn contradicted firmly, earning gasps from those present. No one contradicted the king's advisor. You were poisoned, your majesty, with belladonna. Had it gone untreated much longer, you would have died. Queen Rowena's eyes widened. Poisoned? Who would dare? That remains to be discovered, Theodric said, his gaze moving meaningfully between Lord Osric and Sir Cedric. But rest assured, mother, I will find whoever is responsible. Lord Osric's expression remained impassive, but his son shifted uncomfortably under the prince's scrutiny. Guards will be posted at your door, Theodric continued, and Maerwynn will remain to complete your treatment. Is that wise, my prince? Lord Osric questioned. Given the unusual circumstances? I trust her with my life, Theodric replied simply. As should you all, considering she has now saved both mine and the queen's. Lord Wulfgar cleared his throat. If I may, my prince, I would like to observe the healer's methods. For educational purposes, of course. Maerwynn recognized the physician's attempt to save face while acknowledging her skill. "I would welcome your assistance, Lord Wulfgar," she replied graciously. "The Queen will need monitoring through the night." As the tension in the room gradually dissipated, Maerwynn continued her work, preparing a soothing tea of chamomile and mint to help the Queen rest. The royal guards took positions outside the chamber, while Lord Osric and Sir Cedric reluctantly withdrew, their suspicions temporarily muted, but not dispelled. Hours passed as Maerwynn maintained her vigil, applying cool cloths to the Queen's forehead, administering medicines at precise intervals, and monitoring every change in her condition. Lord Wulfgar watched in silent admiration, occasionally asking quiet questions about her remedies. Near dawn, as pale light began to filter through the chamber's high windows, the Queen's fever finally broke. Maerwynn, exhausted but triumphant, sagged in her chair beside the royal bed. "You should rest," Theodric told her, having remained throughout the night despite his own weakened condition. "Soon," she promised, checking the Queen's pulse one final time. Queen Rowena, drifting between sleep and wakefulness, caught Maerwynn's hand. "Child," she murmured, "what is your name again?" "Maerwynn, Your Majesty, from Ederholt Abbey." "Maerwynn," the Queen repeated slowly. "Remember that name, Theodric. She has the gift." When the Queen finally fell into natural healing sleep, Maerwynn allowed herself to be led back to her small tower room. As she passed through the great hall, she noticed courtiers watching her with expressions transformed from yesterday's disdain to something new: curiosity, wonder, and in some cases, fear. Word had spread throughout the castle. The peasant healer had saved the Queen from certain death, the same healer who had brought the crown prince back from the brink of death weeks earlier. In her exhaustion, Maerwynn barely registered the whispers that followed her passage. "They say she knew it was poison just by the smell." Lord Wulfgar himself admitted he would have continued bleeding her. Perhaps there is something to these old remedies after all. She climbed the winding stairs to her tower room, her legs heavy with fatigue. But as she reached for the door handle, a servant approached with a sealed parchment bearing the royal wolf insignia. "From the prince," the servant explained, bowing lower than he ever had before. Inside her room, Maerwynn broke the seal and unfolded the message. The prince's handwriting was strong and clear. "The royal council meets at midday. Your presence is requested, not as a servant or guest, but as royal healer to the crown of Winthorn. The position is yours, should you accept it. Rest well, Maerwynn of Ederholt. Today, everything changes. Theodric." She read the message 3 times before its meaning fully registered. Then, still clutching the parchment, she fell across her bed and into a deep, dreamless sleep. The first peaceful rest she had known since arriving at Winthorn Castle. The great council chamber of Winthorn Castle gleamed with afternoon sunlight streaming through tall stained glass windows. 12 massive oak chairs surrounded a circular table carved with the history of the realm. Battles and coronations, treaties and betrayals, all rendered in intricate detail. For centuries, only the highest nobles and advisors to the crown had sat at this table. Today, that tradition would be broken. Maerwynn stood outside the heavy iron-bound doors, her heart hammering against her ribs. Lady Elswith had arrived at her room just after noon with a package wrapped in fine linen. "The Queen Mother sent this," she had explained, unfolding the fabric to reveal a dress of deep forest green, simple in design yet made of fine wool with subtle embroidery at the sleeves and hem. For the council meeting. Now, wearing the gifted dress and with her hair neatly braided, Maerwynn waited to be summoned. The usual herbal scent that clung to her was masked by the faint aroma of lavender water that Lady Elswith had insisted she use. "You may enter now," announced the guard, swinging open the heavy door. Inside, the council members had already assembled. Theodric sat at the head of the table, looking stronger than he had since his return, though still bearing the marks of his ordeal. Queen Rowena sat at his right, pale but alert, her silver-streaked hair arranged beneath a simple circlet. Lord Osric occupied a position near the prince, his expression carefully neutral, while his son Sir Cedric stood behind his father's chair, not yet of rank to sit at the council. Lord Wulfgar, the royal physician, was present, as were the High Marshal, the royal treasurer, and several other officials whose functions Maerwynn could only guess at. All eyes turned to her as she entered. "Approach," Theodric commanded, though his tone held warmth beneath the formal address. Maerwynn walked to the table, conscious of every eye upon her, and curtsied as Lady Elswith had taught her. "My lords and ladies of the council," Theodric began, "twice in the span of a month, the crown of Winthorne has faced mortal peril. First in the ambush at Garenfold Pass, where treachery nearly claimed my life, and then in this very castle where my mother was poisoned by an unknown hand." Murmurs rippled around the table at the prince's blunt words. "Twice, we have been saved not by armies or ancient alliances, but by the knowledge and courage of one young woman." He gestured toward Maerwynn. "I have summoned you here today, not only to honor her service, but to address the matter of who seeks to undermine the throne of Winthorne." Lord Osric leaned forward. "My prince, while we all appreciate the girl's assistance, surely matters of state security should be discussed among the council proper, without outside presence." "The outside presence you refer to is the reason we are able to have this meeting at all," Queen Rowena interjected, her voice stronger than her appearance suggested. "Were it not for Maerwynn's swift action, I would be dead, a fact Lord Wulfgar himself has confirmed." The royal physician nodded reluctantly. "Indeed, Your Majesty, the belladonna poisoning was expertly administered. Without the healer's intervention, conventional treatments would have been ineffective. And yet," Sir Cedric spoke from behind his father's chair, ignoring protocol, "we still don't know how the poison was administered, or by whom." "On that matter," Theodric said, "we have made progress." He nodded to the High Marshal, who produced a small silver cup. "This was found hidden in the Queen's chambers," the Marshal explained. "It contains traces of belladonna extract mixed with honey to mask the bitter taste. And more importantly," Theodric continued, "it bears a maker's mark, the same mark found on ceremonial cups given as gifts to the royal household last autumn by Lord Osric's household." A deadly silence fell over the chamber. Lord Osric's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped the arms of his chair. "A grave accusation, my prince," he said finally. "Many such cups were distributed among the nobility. Anyone could have gained access to one." "True," Theodric conceded, "which is why I have not yet ordered your arrest, old friend. But combined with your son's sudden interest in questioning the healer who saved both myself and my mother, it creates a troubling pattern." "You cannot possibly suggest," Sir Cedric began hotly, but his father raised a hand to silence him. "What would you have of me, my prince?" Lord Osric asked quietly. "The truth," Theodric replied. "About Garenfold, about who knew my travel plans, about who might benefit should both my mother and I meet untimely ends." Queen Rowena's gaze fixed on Lord Osric with terrible intensity. "We were friends once, Osric, when my husband still lived. What changed?" For a long moment it seemed Lord Osric would maintain his denial. Then with a deep sigh, his shoulders slumped. "The Northern Treaty," he said simply. "It would ruin my family's holdings. 3 generations of trade routes, rendered worthless by your son's new alliance. So you would commit regicide rather than adapt to changing times?" Theodric asked, genuine sadness in his voice. "I never intended," Lord Osric began, but his son interrupted. "We never intended death," Sir Cedric blurted. "At Garenfold, the orders were to wound, to delay your signing of the treaty. But the mercenaries, they were overzealous. And then when you survived, when this girl somehow saved you," he gestured angrily toward Maerwynn. "Father said we had to act before you fully recovered. The Queen was a simpler target, less protected." "Cedric." "Silence," Lord Osric hissed. But the damage was done. Guards moved forward at a signal from the High Marshal, taking positions behind Lord Osric and his son. "You admit to treason against the crown," Theodric stated, no question in his voice. Lord Osric straightened in his chair, dignity returning now that denial was pointless. "I admit to protecting my family's interests against a ruler too young to understand the consequences of his actions. Take them to the East Tower," Theodric ordered the guards. "They will await formal judgment tomorrow." As Lord Osric and Sir Cedric were led away, the latter's face twisted with hatred as he passed Maerwynn. "This is your doing, Herb Witch," he spat. "Remember that when my family's allies move against you." When they had gone, a somber quiet settled over the council chamber. Theodric rubbed his temples, the strain of the confrontation evident in his posture. "I have known Lord Osric since childhood," he said finally. "He taught me to ride my first horse." "Power corrupts even the noblest hearts," Queen Rowena observed sadly. "But we are not here to dwell on betrayal, my son. We are here to recognize loyalty." "Indeed," Theodric straightened, turning his attention back to Maerwynn, who had remained silent throughout the dramatic exchange. Maerwynn of Ederholt stepped forward. She approached the prince, uncertain of what would follow. "Twice you have saved the royal house of Winthorn," Theodric began formally. "Once at great personal cost, spending days and nights by my sickbed when others had abandoned me for dead. And again, recognizing the poison that nearly took my mother's life when even our court physician was at a loss." Lord Wulfgar shifted uncomfortably, but did not contradict the prince's words. "Such service deserves recognition beyond mere words of thanks," Theodric continued. "Therefore, I hereby appoint you royal healer to the crown of Winthorn, with all rights, privileges, and responsibilities thereof." Murmurs of surprise rippled through the council. No commoner had ever held such a position. "My prince," the royal treasurer interjected, "while the girl's service is indeed admirable, there are protocols, traditions. The position of royal healer has always been held by those of noble birth, with formal training at the collegium. And yet those with such credentials failed where she succeeded," Queen Rowena noted dryly. "Perhaps it is time our traditions evolved. Furthermore," Theodric added, "I grant you the Eastern Herb Gardens and the small stone house beside them as your personal domain, to cultivate and study as you see fit, and access to the royal library, that you might expand your knowledge of healing arts." Maerwynn found herself trembling, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the prince's decree. "My prince," she managed, "I am honored beyond words, but I am just a simple—" "No," Theodric interrupted gently. "You are not just anything. You are Maerwynn of Winthorn now, royal healer and savior of the crown. Accept what you have earned through courage and skill." She looked around the table at the council members, some nodding approval, others still skeptical, but all watching with new respect in their eyes. "I accept," she said finally, her voice growing stronger. "And I swear by all I hold sacred to use my knowledge only for healing and protection of the realm." "There is one more matter," Queen Rowena said, her voice carrying the authority of decades at court. "The girl needs protection. Lord Osric's allies will not look kindly on her role in exposing his treachery." "I have considered this," Theodric replied. From a velvet pouch he withdrew a silver medallion on a chain. A wolf's head, the royal emblem of Winthorn, edged with small emeralds that matched Maerwynn's eyes. "This marks you as under direct royal protection. Any who threaten you threaten the crown itself." He rose from his seat, still moving carefully due to his healing wounds, and placed the chain around Maerwynn's neck. The medallion felt heavy against her skin, a physical reminder of how far she had come from the abbey apprentice who had whispered to a dying knight in the darkness. "The council is dismissed," Theodric announced. "Lady Elswith will show Maerwynn to her new quarters." As the council members filed out, some nodding respectfully to Maerwynn as they passed, Queen Rowena approached her. "You saved my son when he was a nameless knight to you," the queen said softly. "That tells me more about your character than any title or training could. But the path ahead will not be easy. The court can be as deadly as any battlefield." "I have faced death many times, Your Majesty," Maerwynn replied, "in the sick rooms of the abbey, holding the hands of those passing beyond. Court intrigue holds less terror for me." Queen Rowena smiled, a genuine smile that transformed her austere features. "I believe you will do well here, Maerwynn of Winthorn." She touched the medallion at the girl's throat. "This offers protection, but remember that knowledge is your true shield. Learn the ways of court as diligently as you've learned the ways of healing." After the queen departed, only Theodric remained, standing by the great table with an unreadable expression. "You could have returned to your abbey," he said finally. "After saving my mother, you could have asked for gold or land and departed. Why stay in a place where you've faced nothing but scorn?" Maerwynn considered his question carefully. "At the abbey I learned to heal bodies, but here, I believe I can do more. The knowledge in your libraries, the plants in your gardens. With these I might develop remedies that could save hundreds, not just one prince or queen." "Is that all?" he asked, a hint of something like disappointment in his voice. She met his gaze directly, finding courage she hadn't known she possessed. "No," she admitted. "There is also the matter of a promise made." "What promise?" "When you were still fevered, barely clinging to life at the abbey, you spoke in your delirium. You made me promise that if you lived, I would teach you to see the world through a healer's eyes, to see value in what others overlook." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "I intend to keep that promise." Theodric's expression softened. I have no memory of those words, but they are wise nonetheless. He moved closer, taking her calloused hands in his. You saw worth in a wounded knight when others saw only a doomed man. You saw poison where others saw mere fever. What else might you see that the rest of us have been blind to? That remains to be discovered, my prince, she replied. Theodric, he corrected gently. When we are not in formal council, I would hear my name from the lips that called me back from death's threshold. Before she could respond, Lady Elswith appeared at the chamber door, clearing her throat discreetly. If you're ready, my lady, I'll show you to your new home. The title My Lady struck Maerwynn as strange yet not unwelcome. With a final glance at Theodric, she followed Lady Elswith from the council chamber. They traversed the castle to its eastern wing, where gardens stretched beyond stone walls. The small house beside the herb gardens was nothing like the grand chambers of the nobility, but to Maerwynn, it was perfect. Stone walls lined with shelves for her remedies, windows that caught both morning and afternoon light, a hearth for brewing potions, and a comfortable bed far larger than any she had slept in before. The prince had it prepared these past 3 days, Lady Elswith explained. Ever since you saved the queen, he was that certain I would accept the position? Maerwynn asked, running her fingers over a beautifully carved wooden mortar and pestle that sat on a workbench. Lady Elswith smiled knowingly. He was that hopeful, my lady. After the lady-in-waiting departed, Maerwynn stood in the doorway of her new home, looking out at the herb gardens now under her care. Beyond them, the castle rose against the evening sky, its towers catching the last golden rays of sunset. 3 weeks ago, she had been a simple apprentice, invisible to all but the sick and dying. Now she wore the royal emblem of Winthorn and held a position no commoner had ever attained. From her pocket, she withdrew her mother's small bronze mirror, the only possession she had brought from her old life that truly mattered. In its reflection, she saw the same face, perhaps a bit thinner, with new shadows of experience in her eyes, but fundamentally unchanged. I am still myself, she whispered to her reflection, just in a different garden. With that thought, she stepped fully into her new home and closed the door behind her, ready to begin the next chapter of an unexpected life. In the days that followed, the tale of Maerwynn's rise spread beyond the castle walls, carried by merchants and minstrels to distant corners of the realm. They spoke of the humble healer who saved a prince with herbs and patience, who detected poison with a mere breath, who rose from peasant to royal advisor through courage and skill alone. In taverns and village squares, her story kindled hope in those who had believed their stations in life were fixed by birth. In noble houses, it prompted uncomfortable questions about the true nature of worth and wisdom. And in the gardens of Winthorn Castle, a young woman planted seeds both literal and figurative, cultivating healing herbs while nurturing a friendship with a prince that would, in time, blossom into something neither of them had dared imagine possible. For in the end, true nobility springs not from bloodlines or titles, but from the courage to see value where others see nothing, to offer kindness when others offer disdain, and to recognize that wisdom often whispers from the most unexpected sources. This truth, embodied in Maerwynn's journey from abbey apprentice to royal healer, would reshape the kingdom of Winthorn for generations to come. They say that even now, in the royal gardens, a special variety of healing herb grows, one with unusual resilience and remarkable properties. The courtiers call it Maerwynn's Mercy, and its seeds are sent as royal gifts to healers throughout the land, a living testament to the girl who once whispered to a dying knight, "If there's a spark, I will guard it." In our stories, we celebrate those moments when barriers crumble and hearts recognize what truly matters. If this tale has awakened in you the belief that greatness can emerge from the humblest beginnings, then share this journey with others who need its message. Join us in our realm of medieval encounters, where every unexpected meeting might change not just a life, but an entire kingdom. Until our paths cross again in another tale, remember that the true measure of nobility is not in the crown you wear, but in the hands you extend to others.